For joining us on The Skeptic Psychic, where we delve into ancient societies, the ghosts, the paranormal, UFOs, all looking at it from the perspective of the true believer and from the skeptic perspective. Joining me, my partner, my co-host, my sibling, Kimber Rodriguez. Myself, I am Richard Gregg. And again, let's look into being the skeptic psychic.
Hello, and thank you once again for coming on here today. This is the Skeptic Psychic, of course. With me, as always, the smart, the funny, the highly intelligent, the oil that greased the cogs of this fine establishment podcast, Kimber Rodriguez.
Hey, how are you this week?
Doing fine. In fact, today I spent a little bit of time at the International UFO Museum here in the wonderful town of Roswell with a close personal friend of mine that I have not seen in about 35 years.
Oh, wow. That sounds like fun.
Yes. Spent about an hour and a half just talking geek while her husband's sitting on the phone, totally ignoring us.
Well, how's she doing?
She's doing really well, got to hear some revelations that I hadn't understood or anything like that, but it was a good visit, and she really would like to find us more on the web. She's a constant listener to us, normally on our show, but because she's on a trip with her husband, she has to not listen to us, but she's catching the reruns.
Well, that's good. If you see her again before she leaves, give her my love and tell her I wish I could have been there to see her.
She said to give you a nice warm virtual hug.
Oh, okay. Hugs.
Who do we have today on our wonderful show?
Today we are speaking with Joanne Richards, a bookkeeper, mother, grandmother, and happily married to number 7 after 6 rocky marriages. Her book, Midlife Magic, shares stories of lessons learned and offers the hope that it's never too late to change our lives for the better. She speaks about military involvement with UFOs, extraterrestrials, and her own UFO and paranormal experiences. We welcome Joanne Richards to the show today.
Welcome, Joanne. How are you doing today?
I'm well. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Doing fine.
Good.
Anything exciting to happen to you today or this week?
We've had a downpour today. So
Oh, come send it down here to New Mexico. We're in the middle of a drought, so.
I'm sorry. Supposedly we are too, but you never know it by the rain we've had today. So, just life goes on. I'm a bookkeeper, so I'm very busy, even though tax season is over. But I took today off.
That's always a good thing. I got to do that sometimes as well.
Yes.
It's hard to do that as a self-employed person who lives alone.
It's hard to do when you're constantly your brain is in a constant state of work.
Yes.
Being a victim of the dreaded ADHD. So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so far so good. It's a good day. I've been able to calm my mind and get ready for your show, so I was looking forward to it.
All right.
Yeah.
So should we go ahead and get into our questions for Joanne?
Sure. You can go ahead and start if you'd like.
Okay. When you first met your husband, what was your impression of him and his story as for why he was incarcerated?
He told me that he was framed for a murder that he had nothing to do with. Well, first of all, I'll tell you my impression, because throughout all the years that I've known him, he's highly educated. He speaks, he's very articulate. He's funny. He has a lot of good family stories and just lots of stories. And we wrote for 2 months before we could meet in person. So it was a lot of back and forth about what was going on in our lives and just giving each other background. And we just clicked. and that was nice. When you meet him in person, he walks into a room like he's a military officer, like he is, and very sure of himself, and he's very charming and funny, and has a lot of great stories. And so I was very impressed with him as a person. And he's, if I didn't say it, he's very smart, and that's what really attracted to me at the first. I learned through him and his mom that he was framed for this murder. The kids who did the murder said that he masterminded the murder, and that's why he was charged with first-degree murder, even if allegedly he was the mastermind. He was not involved with it at all, but they said he masterminded the murder. He was there when it happened, and he helped them dump the body, which none of that is true. And I believe that. I've read a lot of the paperwork. I've read the trial transcripts. I've read his mom's notes from being, I've read a lot of the paperwork, and I just know from reading that and my gut that he's not guilty of what they charged him for.
Yeah. To me, that almost sounds like they stole the plot of Helter Skelter.
Ah, good. Yeah, you're right. So people have compared him to.
Basically it was all not saying anything wrong or anything like that, but according to Charles Manson, he wasn't there, and they're like, no, he's the one who told us. He sat in the car,
Right. He has been basically accused of being just like Charles Manson and, brainwashing the two teenagers, even though they were almost adults. They were both 17, accusing my husband of brainwashing them into doing whatever he wanted. So,
Does Captain Richards plan to eventually write his life story either in a fictional account or a nonfiction capacity?
Oh, that wasn't on my list. No,
no, this is actually
this is actually a viewer's question.
Oh, I see. I'm not reading that thing, but
right.
When I met him, he told me he was writing his family history, and so yes, he has been writing it for all these years. And there's thousands of pages to it, and it also involves what was going on in the world at the time. What was the latest car thing at the time, a lot of good world history, a lot of good biographies, and then how his family involvement, what his family's involvement was, because they were involved with a lot of, world famous, and they were around for a lot of stuff. So it's a conglomeration of world history and family history. So he has been writing it ever since I've known him. And he keeps adding to it, the details of like what went on around the world in that date and things like that. And on the side of that, he's written, once I started the nonprofit, he started writing reports, and some of them do come across as, if you take the action out of it, like, oh, here's a space battle. Well, it sounds like a Star Trek movie, Star Trek episode, but he adds in all the history and the biographies of the people involved. So it sounds, parts of it sound fictional, but so I could take just that part out of it and make them fictional. But I do have all these reports about different missions he's been on and just different scientific stuff that the military was involved with. So he has written a lot of that kind of stuff that I have for available through my nonprofit. So it would take, a library. He can't condense this all into one book. But I think Carrie Cassidy might be she might write his biography. Who knows?
When did he first tell you about UFOs and his missions and the conspiracy behind his being arrested?
I would say we were several years into our relationship. At first, I knew he was working on this family history, and I would could you look and the internet was just beginning, kind of, in the late 90s. And could you look this up on the internet and see what's being said? Sure. And it was weird because I was trying to look up something about his dad once, and all of a sudden my printer wouldn't work. It's like, it just, some weird things would happen. But it's a few years in, and before I even was, I really didn't know about the UFO stuff, and I hadn't gone to any conferences yet. And he gave me this report called The Battle of Vesta, and it was handwritten because for whatever reason, he obviously in prison, he didn't have access to a computer. And sometimes he had a typewriter that worked and sometimes he didn't. So anyway, this was handwritten. I had to type it, and I'm going, okay, here's a story about you going into space, and I've never heard about people going into space in modern times, except for the civilian stuff. And you're meeting a cat species, and then there's these reptilians here and these other weird things, and you're getting into this big battle, and you almost die. It's like, couldn't you have told me that? So I'm ready. And this girlfriend of yours, like, couldn't you have told me about any of this before I started reading it? So often I find out little truths about him from reading his report, because I guess that was a lot easier for him to just let me read it instead of him remembering what I needed, what he was going to tell me. So that's when I first started really, and then we started talking about it, and then it became more matter-of-factly, but it's not like we sat down for, 2 weeks or whatever, any length of time one day and said, here, let me just tell you everything. Because he's peeled back the onions over 25 years. And I remember it was 2004. Yeah, we were married by then. So 2004, he said, oh, I heard about this UFO conference. Why don't you, in the Bay Area? And that's where our house in California is, the San Francisco Bay Area. It's like, why don't you go? You might want to check it out. And oh, by the way, why don't you see if anybody's talking about reptilians? So it's like, I went and I was fascinated. I was like, oh, this is so cool, because it's like it never became part of my thing growing up or whatever. I watched Martian movies in the 50s and 60s, and it's like, that was it. I didn't think a thing of it. And it's like, oh, this is fascinating information. People are talking about UFOs and aliens, and wow. And I was only going to go for like part of one day. I went back the next day and was listening to all these speakers, and it's like, it was fascinating. By the next year, and then I knew enough about him to know that, I could have a conversation with this, researcher, speaker. And it's like, okay, my husband was involved with some of the things, and I'm looking at this guy's book, and it's like, you're talking in your book about some of the stuff my husband's told me he's done, or I've read it in his reports. So by the next year, I actually had a booth at that conference, and I was, given my elevator pitch or whatever to people as they came to the booth. And that was 2005. So then I started doing radio interviews, and by 2007, I was going to England speaking. So yeah, it took a few years, but I caught up.
Wow. So we do have another question from a viewer that says that the genealogy papers on the website are his family tree.
What genealogy papers on the website? Whose website?
On your website, I believe the question.
I don't have any genealogy pages. Do I? I have 2 websites for the nonprofit, and I don't remember talking about family history. Okay. I have my own family tree. So I'm not sure, what names are they looking at, and what website?
Yes, if the listener can answer that, so that
please clarify.
Yes, please. And just know that, hopefully, maybe, I don't know, when you post the show notes, it's like, if you go to any of my websites, my email's there. So if we don't address something here, I always look at my email. So you're welcome to ask me any other time. So,
yeah.
Okay.
Said we like to kind of get the audience participation.
Sure.
Sometimes I can get kind of a little bit weird questions.
Yes. And how hard was it to believe at first after hearing nothing about it when you first met, or was he upfront from the start with everything?
Well, like I said, it's not that he was hiding it, but that's not what we talked about first. I knew he'd been in the military. I knew his dad was in the military. But when we first started seeing each other, it wasn't like, oh, I used to deal with UFOs in my military experience. That was not part of our initial conversation. And we didn't even talk very much about his military stuff. We talked about food and kids and just everything else. But, that took a while. But by the time we were talking about it, we had developed enough trust between each other so that it wasn't hard to believe it. And I do have evidence around the house in California. It's like, I've got all his dad's military orders, and they all say top secret, and they send him all over the world. And I've got some of Mark's military orders and things that all say top secret. And, I have evidence around the house that shows, okay, yes, the family lived here, and they, just like he said. So I have a lot of evidence that the stories he told me fit. So I really didn't have any trouble believing the whole UFO stuff.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's weird, but by then I just knew it was okay.
Right. So basically, going off the little all that little bit of information, kind of a little bit off topic. So you do have like his both his and his father's DD-214s.
Do I have his dad's DD-214s? I'm not sure, but they're like separate like orders. Like, okay, here's your order tomorrow, report to blah, blah, blah. I have his dad's retirement pages. I'm not sure if I have very much of his dad's DD-214. I only have a couple of pages out of Mark's DD-214. He's never going to show me his whole DD-214. And a lot of it, when even the prison people or the veterans group people that come to work with the veterans at the prison, a lot of it's blacked out because they're not supposed to know. But, there's enough on there that they know he's who he says he is. But, there's stuff in there that I'm never supposed to know. But he told me his DD-214 was like huge. So pretty thick. He's been very busy.
Like I said,
Yes.
mine's about 2 pages, and I was only in for about 4 years. So,
Okay. And they're saying the Edna.org. I don't know what Edna.org is because my
it's actually edhq.org.
yeah, that's one of them. And the other one is edhca.org. Those are the two
okay.
websites for the nonprofit.
Yes, they Edna.org was a mistype. It's actually
Okay.
edhq.org. They replied.
Huh. Well, I don't know that I have any family trees on there, but I'll have to look. Who knows? I do in my talks and things, I talk about some of their lineage. They came from this country or this country, and there's probably some family names thrown about, but it's not like I have a family tree of his posted. So, but we do have very similar lineages. I have German and British lines, and so does he. So his people were just richer than my people.
Well, that's okay. We're kind of the illegitimates of the families.
Well, I'm fine with my heritage, so
Yes.
I've got nothing to be ashamed of.
Same here.
Like I said, nothing ashamed. We're just we're the for not saying anything bad or good. We're just the forgotten stepchildren of our family tree.
No.
That's my opinion.
No. You talk on the 1978 Targia UFO crash includes a plot to turn back our timeline so we would not have the weaponry ready to fight off an alien invasion. What weapons are they hoping to erase? And do you believe in a parallel history where they could have succeeded?
Well, I will be totally honest with you. I've forgotten that whole part of that report because that report is the one part I've actually published is 1,000 pages long, and there's a whole nother part I haven't published. So I'm not sure what particular a weapon they were talking about. But there is stuff about timelines in there. And I know that part of the plot or the backstory of that report was that there's a lovely little insect species who did come to Earth, and it was their ships that crashed. They were tricked by another species into thinking that Earth was not inhabited and their world, wherever it was dying off. And they have the ability to travel interdimensionally, and they also have the technology to cloak themselves and their craft. And this other species that tricked them wanted to, steal all that. So there's a lot of technical stuff that Mark puts in these reports. And so there is stuff about timelines. I just don't remember all of that. And who knows? I've learned over the years that there are multiple timelines, and timelines can be changed. So it's like we may have been on this one and somebody's decided to change it. And that's like, people ask me, they used to ask me, it's like, well, what does Mark think about this? Or what does he think is going to happen? And, when does he think? I go, well, he never predicts the future, even though he may have a good idea of what might be on a certain timeline, because people can change the timeline. And then we're liars. So we're just not going to go there. But that would be a good reason to either read that report or reread that report, because it's full of lots of good information. And the little insects are really delightful. And there's millions of them here on Earth right now. So and they're very friendly. So.
And how does he keep in contact with his alien friends that keep and watch over you?
That's a good question.
Is it kind of like a psychic sort of connection? Or, also with his friends that are still in the space fleet, do they have like a psychic connection, or do they send
Call
him
up on the
letters?
telephone, get letters, that sort of thing,
I will say that he has the ability to communicate telepathically with other beings. So if there's actual technology involved, haven't seen it. I don't know it. He's in prison, so I don't know. I do know he can probably speak telepathically to his friends. He does seem to have some kind of communication with them. He's been kind of open about that. And with the space fleet people, I know that over the years he's still, what can I say? He still has the rank of the rank of a Navy captain. Technically, he's supposed to be retired because he's in prison, but he still has connections with these people. So he's still very much in the loop about what's going on. He's mentioned letters over the years. If you're getting a letter from the Pentagon, it's sealed and the prison people can't read it. So that would really tick off the prison people. So I know he still has connections with certain people in the military. Who they are, I don't know. I've never, I'm not allowed to see those letters anyway. It's not like he sends them home to me. It's not like he has a telephone he can call them up on. So I don't know exactly how it works, but he does have communication with people in the know. And I'm just thinking he's got a two-way telepathic communication going with his alien friends. So.
Well, like I said, this I don't want to make it sound like but it is kind of a little bit of a question of why don't his contacts do a breakout or maybe a prisoner exchange to get him free?
Oh, okay. I have a prisoner exchange. I like that. That's a good question. And it's funny because everybody asks me, or many people ask me, it's like, well, why doesn't the president pardon him? I'm going, well, number one, the president does not have jurisdiction over state inmates. So even if he wanted to, technically he shouldn't. And presidents usually don't pardon somebody that's accused of a violent crime, guilty or not. Every time I hear the president pardoning somebody, it's not a violent crime. If his aliens friends tried to break him out, it would be very messy because they would want to have lunch when they would go in to break him out. Especially if you're dressed in green. And the other thing is he would be on the run and he'd have to leave the planet. So then he'd leave me and all his kids and his grandkids. So
I'm sorry. I just had to laugh about the fact of lunch, because I know exactly when you say lunch.
Yes, his friends that would be the most likely to break him out would definitely want to eat his captors.
Right. So, like I said, it's just one of the odd questions that have popped
I know
up.
what they're talking about. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm reading the genealogy thing. So can I go back to that question?
Of course, yes.
I don't have those reports memorized, but a lot of the stuff he wrote in the genealogy type reports, and especially he wrote a couple of reports about castles in like Scotland and England and stuff. And those are related to his family lineage. He would have written about a specific castle if his family had been involved in it. And again, I would have to go through the genealogy source material to see what's in it, because I haven't read every single report. Sometimes especially if I didn't have to type it, I would just say, okay, I'll copy it and here it's available. So, but that doesn't mean I have it. So thank you. I'll probably have to go look that up. Because now you have me curious, like, what family tree? I don't know what you're talking about. So I will go look that up. Yes. But yeah, if he wrote it, it probably has something to do with his family lineage. Yes. So anyway, yeah. So anyway, his friends are probably not going to break him out unless they absolutely have to. And if they absolutely really need him and there's no way to do it. And that would be a really messy, violent act of disclosure. and they would rather do disclosure peacefully.
Right.
Yes.
Like I said, just kind of a prisoner exchange, that sort of thing.
That would be good. Yeah, I'll have to ask him about that one.
Yes.
Well, maybe he's right where they want him at this time.
Yes.
There might be something that might be going on that
behind the scenes that they're preparing for. Yes.
That, or they're protecting him.
I'll leave that to your imagination.
Yes.
Like I'm sure there's a good reason for him to be there, just not what we think. So
right.
Right.
So, anyway, just kind of that was one of the questions that I had personally.
Okay.
Yes. And your website states that you're a nonprofit. Can you tell us more about it? Like, what is the mission and what proceeds go toward? Also, that I do show that there are 2 websites.
Yes.
So is one about to be phased out and you're moving on to the other one?
It's like I start these things not knowing what I'm doing. And back when I started the nonprofit, I still probably had a publishing company that was a different name than what I did my book under. And I was doing an environmental little newspaper, and here's some environmental stuff. Here's some cool places to go in the area. And we started getting a little more political, especially when Afghanistan happened. And then I also did a literary magazine, which was a lot of environmental stories and things like that. And it was his writing and other writings that other people did that was really cool. Well, that takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of money. And, you would hope that you get advertising, but that was never my strong suit. So, okay, they didn't last forever and ever. And then I decided to do the nonprofit and it was going to include environmental stuff and all kinds of stuff. The mission of it is to share information that is not readily available, or it's little known history, or stuff that's not going to be seen in mainstream textbooks or mainstream news. And I would say, and yes, its current focus is secret space program, space stuff, because that's kind of where my focus went, and I love that stuff, and I love learning about alien species. So that's its focus now. The proceeds are never huge, and sometimes I'm lucky that it might cover a trip that I'm taking to go speak at a conference. Sometimes I'll pay myself a little bit because I've gotten paid to speak. So sometimes I pay myself as the executive director a little bit. Obviously, I still have my own full-time business because the nonprofit's not paying my bills. But I have some, and Mark donates all the things that he writes. So it's not like I'm sending him money out of the nonprofit. I don't want anybody to think that he's getting paid to do any of that. But hopefully I'm going to have some help by the end of the year who will help me implement some plans and to just make it more robust and do more things. And I did hire somebody. So the edhca.org was the first one, and I built the website, and then I had somebody redo it. And yes, it is out of date because keeping a website up to date is not my strong suit. And I was lucky if I could just post on there, oh, I'm going to be speaking here, blah, blah, blah. I don't have anybody else helping me. This is a one-person show. So, and the other one I started because one of my bookkeeping clients is a web person and an internet marketing person. And so he was working with people. It's like, well, in 3 hours, I can help you do a Squarespace website. And so we used a lot of the material from the one thing, but it was more up to date, current looking, and it's got a video on there. And then just recently I was able to hire somebody. It's like, I want to make it so that people can order these things, pay, and then download so that they don't have to go through me and wait. Well, he was able to figure that out and do it for me. It's like, that was the best small investment I ever made. So now you can not everything is digitized, but most everything is digitized, and you can order it and just pay and download, and it's great. Yeah. There's enough on there to keep. I'd love to have a better mailing list. Yes, there is a mailing list, but I'd love to have a bigger mailing list. Obviously.
Yes. Is there a way that they can sign up for the mailing list through the website, or?
I would say that's yes. and again, it's not as sophisticated as it needs to be. So I would use the edhq.org. And if it doesn't have a place to click and do the website, my email's on there. So at least email me. And I do have a mailing list going, and I'll get that. It's like, I promise I'll get better at this part.
No problem. And we'll go ahead and include that email
That'd
at
be
the end
great.
of the show too, with the show notes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Okay. In your book, Midlife Magic, you state that you have sensed spirits of the departed for many years.
Yep.
Do you believe that having that experience has helped you open yourself to the other experiences that are otherworldly?
I do. And it's interesting because back when I had the early experiences, I was, still an active Mormon, and I was married to number 3. And I was at some funerals, and that's where I had the experiences. And then I kind of forgot all about it and didn't, I just forgot about it until I met Mark, and until, he had told me about, there's an aircraft carrier in the San Francisco Bay, the USS Hornet. Yeah.
Yes.
And it has naval history. And so it's a cool historical place to go to. Cool. So I went there once and did an interview with the person in charge of that kind of stuff back then. And, so I wrote an article. Here's this really cool naval vessel. It's now a museum, and it's being restored over time, and it's a really cool place to visit. And then Mark says, well, okay, now I hear, there's a lot of ghost activity on there, and there's these psychics, and this psychic is speaking in the Bay Area. You might want to go listen to her speak. And I did, and I was totally in. And then I met her, and she took me on a private tour of the ship, kind of after hours. And it's like, oh, okay, the wall is cold here. And it's like, anyway, so I had several ghost experiences on that ship with her. And I have also I've been on that ship with her and with my good psychic friend who lives in England. And when I go there, I can feel my father-in-law's spirit, because he always hangs out with me on the flight deck when I go, because he and Mark had been on that ship. They weren't his dad was Air Force, but Mark wasn't stationed there, but they'd had some military actions on that ship after it was decommissioned with aliens. So, so his spirit was there, and he always shows up, and I could feel it, and my friends could see him. So that was really cool. So and that particular psychic, the one from California, she and I also went to the governor's mansion in Sacramento that is usually used as a museum, but there's definite ghost activity that goes on there. So, and before we were all using digital cameras, I would take my 35 millimeter and take black and white photos, and then I'd get them processed like, oh, it's right there on the wall. You can see the energy going, ooh, not waving at me, but you can just see the weird energy that's like a distortion of the image. But I could, before I took a picture, I could feel, look, there's something over there. And sometimes I can look in a window and see the shadow. And my friend in England can see the person just how they appeared when they were alive. And I can feel them, and I can see the shadow. So together we make this fabulous team when we go to different historical places. Awesome. And, sometimes we're just sitting in her house, and, okay, well, these people want to come through and talk to you. It's like, okay. Or, okay, well, Mark's dad is here and he's got a message for you. Okay.
Yes.
So
is it something that you've experienced your whole life, or is it something that developed as you were older?
I didn't notice it till I would have been in my 20s. Again, with husband number 3, when he was a funeral director. So, and then I just kind of forgot all about it. And until I started doing these things with the psychic and the Hornet. So it's like, oh yeah, I can feel that. Oh yeah. And it's not like I don't hang a shingle saying I'm a paranormal investigator, because I don't take the time and but I am, when I go to a lot of historical places, especially when I'm in England with my friend, we do, we may be just at a historical place. It's like, oh, okay, well, the fairies are here today. And that's not necessarily paranormal, but it's like, okay, well, here's a ghost here, and it's feeling very friendly. Here's a ghost down in, what would have been the very military part of this castle, or it was a fort, but it's like, oh, this guy's not very friendly, and we need to leave the area.
Right.
So yeah, it's been fascinating. And so I have that. It's like, yeah. And I haven't gone anywhere lately, so I haven't had those fun experiences, and I've been traveling. It's usually when I'm traveling and hanging out with my friend in England. So
yes, and I'm sure with COVID right now, it's been kind of hard to get out there. And
yeah, and I know somebody asked, has there any new stuff? Like the websites are kind of out of date. It's like with COVID, that's kind of slowed us down. And obviously I wasn't going and speaking at conferences. And between COVID and there's a certain journalist who will remain unnamed that has been harassing us and working on a documentary to discredit us. Mark's kind of slowed down the new stuff he's been writing about. It's not that he's not writing it. I'm just not getting it. So he hasn't, it kind of discourages you from being creative and putting your energy into something important, when over here you've got this person trying to tell the whole world that we're lying sacks of whatever and don't believe a word they say. So
putting out the negative vibes is basically something of what you're trying to say, that don't believe them, that I've got proof, but they don't show proof that they're a bunch of liars.
Right.
And yes, I can understand how discouraging that can be.
Yeah. And in today's world, it's like, well, if I show you, it's like, no matter what kind of proof I may show you, you can either doctor it or tell me it's forged, or it's like, it's a whole he said, she said thing. So, so we're just sitting back and waiting for the guy's documentary, if it ever gets done, and then we'll deal with it. So
right. Now, also in your book, that you were at a small conference in Philadelphia, and you felt that really sick.
Yeah.
That something energetically hit you. You said it was some sort of attack. Do you believe it was a psychic vampire, some type of weaponry, or alien influences, that sort of thing? What do you believe attacked you, and why?
It was interesting. It was 2010. And a man who used to organize huge conferences back in Philadelphia, and he's now passed, but we became good friends. He met me at, conferences in the US, and really loved what Mark and I were doing, and really became good friends with us, and said, I think everybody needs to hear what you guys have to share. He organized a small workshop mini conference. About 100 people came in Philadelphia. And it was a whole day thing. And I think I gave like 8 talks, and it was just nonstop. It was like maybe early afternoon till like 10 or so at night. It was just one talk after the other. And it's the only time that Mark asked a host to have some protection for me. So the guy hired or got volunteers to be my bodyguards all day long. And the last one was a really cool former, he was cute. It was a former SEAL. It's like, okay, he can protect me all day long. But it was, it's like they followed me to the bathroom and stood outside the bathroom. It's like, and and we were in a small building, Mark can't say, it's like, I don't know if Mark had a premonition or if somebody warned him. I don't know what the deal was, because I've never really felt unsafe places, but he just told the guy, you need to protect her no matter what, or I won't be happy. And about my last, I think I had 2 talks left to give. One of them was going to be on the Dulce base and the bad things that happened there. And everybody was, they really wanted to hear that talk. And yes, I had been eating throughout the day. I had been drinking water throughout the day and stuff. But all of a sudden, I just felt like, oh, I can't stand up anymore. My stomach hurts. My head really hurts. I just felt really bad. But I rallied and said, no, this is important information. So I don't know what to call it. There was some kind of energetic attack. So there wasn't like anybody was standing in the back of the room with a gun or some kind of, no visible weapon. Yes, there were people maybe standing in the doorways or whatever. So I don't know where it came from. I just know that that's one of the few times where I felt threatened physically, but I knew I had to rally and give the talk, and I'm glad I did. And so, they were glad I did, but I would say that's as close as I've come to a physical attack.
All right. Follow-up question on that. You've been protected by creating a safety net or a bubble around the audience yourselves at the conference. Was this something that you taught yourself, something that was learned after the event, or something?
And I wouldn't. It's funny. I was like, I wouldn't say I necessarily put it around the audience. Maybe I do, but I don't. But I definitely, and I don't know who taught it to me, but different psychics I've talked to or mediums that I've worked with. I know there's a channeling person that I work with, and they teach this, but somewhere along the line, I've learned, and maybe it's through some of my witchcraft classes, or who knows. I can't remember where I first heard this, but I was just taught to imagine yourself surrounded by, well, two ways, surround yourself like with white light or golden light or whatever, and that's very protective. More recently, people I work with, it's like, imagine yourself in a bubble. So that's also very protective, like of your favorite color. But I do know that the first time I went to England to speak in 2007, I knew that some of my elemental friends, my fairy friends, went with me. And I kind of go into, whether there's an actual green room or not, I separate myself from the audience, go into a little quiet space just to ground myself and just say, please give me the, something, the strength to say what I'm supposed to say. And just, so I feel all together. And I just, that first year in England, I remember distinctly, and I was probably just sitting in the audience, but kind of away from people and just quietly thinking to myself all this stuff. But I remember behind me just feeling this powerful strength. And it's like, okay, my friends are here. It even feels like my husband's here to listen and support me and, whatever. But every time I go to speak, especially at a big thing, but even sometimes at small gatherings, I take myself out of the room and ground myself and add protection or call on protection or call on my spirit guides to help me say the right things or whatever. But except for that time in Philadelphia, it's always worked. But I don't think I knew to do that before Philadelphia.
Yes.
Well, I did. No, I did.
Right.
I'm sorry.
That's why I followed up with that question.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't know that the whole bubble thing before Philadelphia, but I've always grounded myself to ask for guidance. But that I wasn't necessarily asking for protection. Now I know to ask for protection.
Yes. So is this something that you believe anyone can open themselves up to? If yes, how would somebody start?
Yes, I think anybody can. And it is as simple as just quieting yourself, imagining yourself encased in a bubble of your favorite color and asking whoever it is, whatever higher power you believe in, ask somebody higher than yourself or your highest self, ask somebody just for help to protect you and make you feel safe. And that's the easiest way. It doesn't have to be a grand magical practice. It doesn't have to be a huge prayer. It can be as simple as just a little meditation type thing, whatever, but it's very helpful.
Yes. And what about opening up to sensing spirits and elementals and fae? Would that be kind of along the same lines? Or?
It would be. And I was going to say, I do put a bubble thing around my house in California because people have, bad things have happened there. So, but yes, doing and opening yourself up to these new wonderful things is as simple as having the intention that that's what you would like to do and coming from a kind place, not that you wanted to go off into some dark place, but having the intention and even meditating a little bit on it, even a short meditation, just to put yourself in the space to be open and have an open mind. If you go into something like thinking, oh, this is not going to be true, just prove it to me type of thing, forget it. It's like
right.
the fairies may want to prove it to you by pushing you down the stairs, So I don't think that's the way you want to get proven. And like for the fae, I leave them treats. Especially when there's holidays and, I have houses and beds for them and I make them treats, especially holidays and special moon phases and, things like that. So I treat them as part of the family. So
what kind of treats do you make for them?
Oh, I keep it pretty simple. Mark used to give me this list on this day you need to do this and this and this. And it's like, they like nuts, they like chocolate, they like cookies, they like sweets, they like alcohol. So every now and then I might give them some mead or wine, but it's a lot of chocolate, or they're kind of like me, chocolate, cookies, just sweets, whatever works, candy, leave it there, nuts, bread, water. My yard, my gardens in California, there's lots of vessels that we keep water in, and I remind my house sitter to make sure those are filled up, because not only are we, helping the unseen because they need to drink, and also the deer come into my yard regularly and have their babies there and hide there. So yeah, and I have a lot of critters that just need to be fed.
Well, the other day I was driving to work and I saw a herd of does and fawns going across the road.
Nice.
Buck was kind of watching the road as they were running across. It's like, wow.
Yeah,
it's something I like seeing. It's
right.
Yeah, our property has always been a haven for a refuge for the deer and all kinds of animals. I'm not happy that the raccoons will take the shingles off the roof and go into the attic, but it's like then we cover up the hole. But the deer love it, and they usually, one or two are usually having their babies there every year. And I wrote about this at the end of my book, but it's like a couple years ago, I've always seen maybe one or two deer. I've never seen a whole herd on the property. I've usually seen a couple of bucks, fighting or whatever, and usually just the does and their babies. This one day I was walking down the driveway from the house, because it's a long driveway from where the house is to the car gets parked. And I saw I think it was I saw the does and their babies running down the hill. It's like, oh my gosh, there's a whole herd of the doe, and then running down our hill, going across the street and going up the other hill to the more woody area. It's like, well, that's cool. And then all of a sudden I'm, it's like, oh my gosh, look at all these bucks. And then there's this whole group of bucks from maybe 2 years old up to the grandpa or the great grandpa. And I go, I probably saw you when you were a baby, the tiny little antlers to the full rack of antlers. And it was so magical. I loved this. It was so magical. And the youngest one came right down, as far down the hill as it dared to get close to me. And we had this connection that was like, oh, okay, honey, it's okay. You're safe on the hill. I thank you for being here. This is so cool. Thanks for being brave enough to come talk to me. And
I consider myself a St. Francis of Assisi when it comes to animals.
Cool.
I've had instances where wild animals will probably become between 6 to 12 feet from me, and I just acknowledge them, and they don't go any further, but they it's like a weird feeling, because it's like we're connecting on a different level, and 9 times out of 10, they'll turn around and bolt off, or I'll take a step forward and scare them. But it's like that moment where nature and humanity have are that silent acknowledgement. Yes, we know you're there.
Thank you. And one of my trips back to California to check on the house and stuff, one of the does was there, and again, I don't pretend that they're going to want me to touch them. It's like, I don't even go there, but it's like I can get close enough to them. And this doe and I was down at the level below her. She was up in the upper garden, and it's like, but we were pretty close, just a few feet apart. And we had this moment, and it was like the vortex opened up, and we had this total connection. And I was talking to somebody on the other side who was saying, well, now you're just connected to that whole nature, animal, deer world, and they're all going to know you're a good person. And it's like, well, that's the coolest thing ever. If that's my whole legacy, I'm good.
I had a baby pheasant chick actually follow and get into my hands, and I took him to a little rescue mission area. So, and it, like I said, it was just that connected moment to where like I said, it's a Saint Francis of Assisi vibe, where they know that I do not believe in any harm to them, and you know, they know that I am not to be harmed as well.
Oh, cool. You know, it's like I love collecting Father Christmases, and I don't have a ton of them, but I have one, and my daughter wonders why I don't put it away when Christmas is over. But it's, you know, Father Christmas, and there's animals all around him. And it's like, well, I just think he's cool, and I'm not putting him away. Hello, Mike.
Hello,
Manchester,
Mike.
England. Wonderful. I
Yes.
love visiting England. And I just found out, because I always thought my British ancestors were from Manchester, and I just got another link from my ancestry.com, you know, hints and stuff, but they were from the Lake District. So it's like, okay. But most of the time when I go to speak in England, it's been in that Blackpool, Lytham, St. Anne's area. So, you know, I love England. I just love England.
Yes.
Thank you, Mike, for saying that we're really cool, by the way. I've always wanted to visit Manchester, Blackpool, all those little Mersey, you know.
Yeah, Blackpool's a
little-
trip. Blackpool is a trip. It reminds me of what probably Atlantic City is probably like, or Coney Island.
Coney Island.
You know, and that's not where the conference was held that I was at, but I have flown into Manchester, and I had to rent a car from the Manchester airport, and I was like, oh, that was terrible. I did not do well driving in England. Thankfully, I didn't ever have to drive after that trip. It was horrifying.
Like I said, I don't want to go to Liverpool because the Beatles are from there. I wanted to go because it's the shipbuilders.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I know Blackpool's kind of funny, but I've gone, you know, in the summer they have this festival called the Lights or something like that. And that's pretty interesting. But, you know, I do have friends in that area because they put on the conference, and I still feel like I'm family. So
That's
anyway.
awesome.
Yeah.
So, do you believe that natural magic and Christianity can walk hand in hand, even if it didn't work for you?
Yes. And I didn't leave the Mormon church because I was all of a sudden a witch. You know, that happened down the road, or that I had started even learning about it. It was two different things. And I know in several classes I've taken, and, you know, I'm on a few like Facebook groups or whatever. It's like witchcraft and practicing magic has nothing to do with your religion. And so there's Catholics and Buddhists and all kinds of people who practice magic, because with me, you know, magic is science, and it's honoring nature. And it really has nothing to do with Christianity or whatever dogma you want to believe in. I left the Mormon church kind of for a weird reason, not because I had, and I know you didn't even ask me this, but it was like I met my husband, and all of a sudden I wanted to visit him more than I wanted to spend time at church. And if you're a Mormon, you spend a lot of time at church and serving, you know, during the week and stuff. It's like, well, I'd rather be visiting this guy who's really fascinating. And, you know, I can't visit him and go to church all day long on Sunday practically. And all of a sudden I just didn't feel the need for it. It just no longer served me. And I'm fine with the path I've chosen. And, you know, and it's not like my family were Mormon, so I never had any trauma around the church. My family did not disown me because I left the church. They were probably glad. You know, my brother, who's a born again Christian, is probably really happy, but, you know, he's probably not happy that I'm, you know, a witch either, but I'm sure he's not read my book.
Right. No, I wonder that, because like I grew up Christian, but I've always felt that there was more to it than what the church teaches. And it's not that I don't think the church is true, but it's more like there's more out there that we don't know.
Right.
And I feel like, you know, if I have these feelings and these thoughts and I'm coming from them in a loving place, then, you know, it should be okay, because in the Bible, it talks about the talents given to us from God,
Right.
and how we are supposed to use these talents. So why is saying, oh, well, this is evil, if it says in the Bible, God gives you this talent? So, but it goes back to intention, I think.
It does. And we are reminded that the Bible was written way long after Jesus was alive, and Jesus was a great person.
Mm-hmm.
I think very highly of him. And I do commune with people who are on the other side, and it's like, there's no religion on the other side.
Right.
So, and anyway, it's totally different than what I was taught in church. And again, and all the major churches leaders know about UFOs and aliens and the truth of all that. And most of them are all involved with the military and dealing with all that stuff. So it's not like they don't know about it, just that they're not going to teach that over the platform. And, Mark used to deal with people that would then store alien debris and put it in the Vatican archives. And he would deal with Catholic leaders, and he would work with the Mormon leaders and their military people. And, they all worked together. So yeah, it's not like they were saying, well, we don't believe in the aliens, but we're going to help you with the aliens. And,
Well, question that's off the, not on the list, that sort of thing. You had mentioned the fact that many of the alien species proclaim that they're the ones that created the human race here on Earth, and then you had Captain Richards had said that there was a cat creature that
Right.
gave a full report to the United Nations that says no, actually, we all planted the seeds of humanity on this Earth.
So back in 1971, there was going to be, in 1961, when Mark was a kid, there was an interstellar treaty conference in southern England. And I've been to the site and seen a lot of the places where the aliens stay, blah, blah, blah. Mark was there as a kid. His dad was helping run the conference. And so Mark met a lot of, he got firsthand experience with seeing a lot of different species. Go forward to 1971, he's now a young adult, and he's helping work UN security forces at the next conference. And there is a lovely cat species. They look like panthers, but they walk upright. And they are scientists and archaeologists. And he said at the time of that conference, there were at least 9 species who said, oh, we created the humans. We should be God of the planet. We should be in control. Oh, we created the human. But so there were at least 9. And this one cat, Contessa Leona, one of her jobs, she would go around to different archaeological sites to see maybe where her species had visited. But before this conference, her task was to search for evidence of, okay, well, which species is telling the truth? Which species created the humans? And even though I don't have the end of that huge report that Mark wrote about this conference, he did tell me, it's like what she found was that no one species created the human race. Many species have helped us, enhanced us, or helped us thrive, but no one species can say they were our sole creators, and that they should, be God of this planet, or they should control the humans or whatever. So, and it's like, and the cat, Contessa Leona, sounds so cool anyway. So she's on my bucket list of which species I want to meet. So
being a cat lover, I could go there too.
With a name like Contessa Leona, sign me up. I'll be third in line.
Okay, good. I want, and I say this almost every talk. It's like, I was in England once, and my friend and I passed like a real estate office, and there was this ad for this beautiful, like restored, I think it was a Georgian mansion, long driveway. It had fields and a big house and a 2-bedroom cottage, a paddock for the horses. I go, oh, let's write a check. Not that he did, but it's like, write me a check. I want this house. I want to have this place where nobody can see your alien friends landing. You could have horses. Our friend here could live in this cottage, or we could have workshops here. This is my ideal place, just to have a place where everybody can come and talk and visit and have tea, because you got to have tea. And no, the people that shouldn't be seeing them yet won't see them, because we now live way back off the road. And it's like, okay, we never bought that house, but that's still always my dream.
Mike from Manchester asks, are aliens on a different dimension, and is God an advanced alien?
Thank you. And Mike, have we ever met? Did you ever go to Probe UK? So you can answer that on your own time, but answer that when you can. So are aliens on a different, so aliens, I think some can be interdimensional, like Sasquatch or the Yeti, Bigfoot. They have the ability to be interdimensional. and I don't know all, I don't know all the species, and I don't know which ones can, and some can just travel interdimensionally. There are also other species, that clearly live out in space and have a place in space where they live and have a whole empire and whatever. Some live in the oceans. Okay, Mike, thank you. Well, next time I'm in England, we'll have to meet. And do I think God is an advanced alien? That would not surprise me, because, once I started talking to Mark and we started talking about the whole Joseph Smith story, I go, well, it's like, it kind of became clear. And I've actually heard somebody else say that they were talking. It's like, Joseph Smith was probably not talking to God or Jesus or angels. He was probably talking to aliens, because a lot of times, a lot of people that we're talking to, what they might have thought were angels were probably aliens. So, who knows? So, and again, I don't think there's just one person that's God anymore. So, that's just me. But, but I don't think there's just one thing that, created everything. So I don't want to give anybody that credit, but, God probably is an alien. Isn't there a song about that?
No, me personally, I look at the fact of you go into Revelations and John, meets his first angel and he falls down and starts to worship him, and the angel's like, "No, do not worship me. I am serving somebody that is far better than me. Worship him instead of me." So
right, yeah. And it's interesting because, again, once I started getting into this whole area of information, it's like, then you hear about, okay, there's all this ancient artwork in these caves all over the planet that are evidence of visitors, and with space helmets on and spacesuits. And then you see these paintings from the Middle Ages, and okay, that's clearly a UFO in the sky. Mm-hmm. And in one of my talks about different alien species, I have a little sculpture. I don't know what kind of material it was. It didn't deteriorate. That was from hundreds of years ago, if not, thousands of years ago. But anyway, it's really old, and it was found in a cave, I think in Germany. I'd have to look at my PowerPoint, but it's a cat. So as Mark said, okay, people way back then probably did their sculptures based on what they saw. So if you see this huge cat walking upright, you probably actually saw one, because who would think of that?
Right.
I'm not discounting anybody's imagination, but it's like, you usually, especially in primitive times, more primitive, it's like you probably are only going to do artwork about stuff you see, I would imagine. So
is it ancient Indian texts, not talking about Native Americans, but people from India? Their stories are basically gods battling one another in sky chariots. So
yeah. So yeah, it's fascinating, and I love seeing the different artwork, and it's all over the world. Mm-hmm. And what was I going to say? Even just a few years ago, before COVID hit, one of my newer talks, I mean, a lot of my talks are not based on new information, except for the one he wrote up about ISIS and stuff. But, most of it is based on research or like stuff he did back in, when he was active. But he has compiled information about like Africa. And I have one talk about all the sightings and activities in different areas and different countries that have numerous UFO sightings or alien, stuff going on, or people seeing monsters, and all over Africa. And I haven't even gone through the material about Northern Africa, but there's a lot of stuff going on there. But, it's fascinating.
It is, definitely.
Next. This is fun.
Oh yeah, we always try to be have fun in it,
Yes. Your friend Carrie Cassidy with the Project Camelot has spoken before about the government's attempts to kill her. Yeah. Why do you think that they haven't targeted you?
I think because they know better than to piss my husband off. And he has resources to retaliate. So bless his heart. I just think for whatever reason, I'm very well protected, and somebody knows not to go after me. And I will say though, like the first time I was going to England, and I was so naive back then, but somebody in the government came to him or went to him and said, tell your wife, it's like, and they always know what he's talking about or what I'm talking about. They always know. And he checks in with people. Okay, is it okay for me to talk about this yet? Yes or no? But they told him, it's like, she can go there, but she may not list names of people in the British government or military who are active or who've been involved with the space program over there. It's like, okay, or we will arrest her. It's like, okay. And so I didn't, but I, can say, I was allowed to say, okay, I know I can't give names until we're over here in this private group, and then I will give you names. But your government is involved with space stuff. They know all about it and they're involved with it. So that's all I can say from the speaking podium. But come meet me afterward and I'll tell you that Prince Philip was in charge of your British space program. And, I'm sure. And Prince Charles was at that England conference when he was a teenager. He saw aliens. He's not going to admit that now, I'm sure, but he saw aliens. And it's like, it's just interesting. So, but I've been very blessed and protected. So I'm grateful. If my husband has a part of that, that's great. But again, you don't want to piss him off. So.
Right. Yes. Mike asks, do you think that they are from our galaxy or further away? I think he's going back to what we were talking before. Yes.
Well, I know there's a lot from our galaxy, and our galaxy is vast. But I have no doubt that there is stuff. My mind is just wide open, so I have no doubt that there's probably stuff from way out there. I know Mark has traveled many different places within our galaxy, but I don't know if he's gone beyond the galaxy. I don't know. Have I asked him that? I don't know.
I also kind of believe there might be terrestrial aliens.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there are the raptors, one type of reptilian that I talk about a lot, and their cousins, the reptoids. They evolved from dinosaurs here on this planet. They originated here. Mm-hmm. Now, the reptoids, who are evil, nasty, and are working with President Putin and have worked with ISIS and other, bad things. They still have bases here with sort of the raptors, but everybody's got a base out in space. The raptors have a huge empire out in space, but they've decided it's a good idea to work with the humans. So they are our allies, and they've been our allies since the early 50s, and they do work with our military. So yes, there's a lot of things. And then we have, like I said, the little insect creatures, we helped them create bases here on the Earth because their world died. So they're here. And then there's several species who live in the ocean. Some of them originated here. Some of them came here from space and decided to stay. So it's a mix.
Yeah. I mean, again, we don't really know whether Atlantis is still around. We do know we've got the stories of it being destroyed, but who knows? Maybe they built a underwater sea, and Aquaman and
I love that movie.
And Namor are basically two separate kings of the Atlantis.
I loved that movie. I didn't think I would because I don't really go in for that. I hadn't really. It's not like I watched what is it, the Marvel part? It's like
right.
That was up to my grandchildren. But it's like I watched that one for some reason, probably because of the actor. But it was. I loved that movie. That was fabulous. So, what was I going to say? The interesting thing too is there's a lot of species who have been here to visit, and either they may have had a base here for a while, or maybe it's a temporary base. There's a lot of species who come here for vacation because we have a really cool planet.
There's a lot of tourist trap.
We do, and it sounds funny, and people maybe don't believe me because I add humor to this stuff, because to me it's just like, well, okay, they don't look human, but they're just like us, or not just like us, thankfully, but there's a species, a dog species, a lovely hound dog species. Their whole mission, and they've been visiting the planet and interacting with humans for thousands of years. All they do now is they have a base in Australia, unless they're not there right now because of COVID. I don't know. But it's like they have a base in Australia and they buy commodities and export them into space because the aliens want chocolate and jewelry and fine silks and things like that. So people think I'm crazy when I bring that up, but as far as I know, it's true. There are other species who just come here for a vacation, like I said, and some come to study science things and just study us weird things called humans. So, and that's not to say there isn't plenty of bad things that happen to humans because of certain aliens, but I don't like to get into that.
I can answer that, Mike. I do believe that aliens do have emotions and a conscience.
Yes. I will say that the raptors and I'm talking about the raptors like from Jurassic World. They look like that, and they are some of the most spiritual creatures I've ever. I mean, I haven't encountered them, but they are very spiritual, and they believe everything is connected. Whether you look human or whether you have eyes or whatever, it's like everything is connected and everything is infinite and there's abundance. And it's just, and I don't have this quote I always give. I didn't pull it out for this, but it's like, it is, you just cry when you think, okay, that's a dinosaur saying that quote in front of all these species. And there are other species who it's almost like a very Zen thing. And I will say, you and I were talking about this other host when he brought his religion into this, and we're not going there, but, he asked me if aliens were Christian or if the raptors were Christian. I said no. But that doesn't mean that the aliens are not spiritual. And they're all older than we are. They've been around for a lot longer than we have. And I would say they probably do have a conscience. And some of them are very intelligent. And there's so many types. It's just like I could spend the rest of my life studying them and just not get enough. But let's see. Okay, has Mark specified any Earth species we know of that are actually aliens? Yes, there is an octopus species that are, I don't know if they originated here, but there is an octopus species. There is an alien species they can look like dolphins. So sometimes when you're swimming with the dolphins or when you see the dolphins, that might be this particular alien species. They're called polymorphs. If you've ever watched the movie Abyss, which is one of my all-time favorites, that whole jellyfish looking species that you could see through, and they had the beautiful lights. It was really, really deep down in the sea. There is a species like that. And they can turn themselves into mermaids if that's what you want to see, or they can turn themselves into whatever you want to see, they can. And if they need to come on land, they have to take on the body of something or somebody that's just drowned. So they can make themselves animate, but they have to, like that little girl just drowned. Well, okay, this little alien girl now will take over her body so that she can come onto Earth, because most creatures that are not from here or that they're under the ocean, they have to take on some kind of biosuit so they can walk around on land.
I mean, I did like in the Abyss when they did interact with the guy, that they were actually kind of liquefied.
Yes.
They
yes, and that whole maybe this is common if you're doing a really deep dive, and it's like that liquid oxygen stuff they had to breathe or drink or whatever.
Right.
That is a real thing. So I don't know if that's a real thing for like when you're just going down in a human vessel. I don't know, but I know Mark's been in like a vessel that an oceanic species had, and they had to do that. They had to do this whole liquid oxygen type thing. So that kind of thing is real. Is it possible somebody I know is disguised raptor? Oh, it's fine, Mike. The raptors, as far as I know, do not usually take on
human forms or anything.
Yeah, they really like being dinosaurs. So I don't think they shapeshift, and I don't think they would try and hide themselves. I mean, a lot of species, and this is another humorous thing, they like to go to Comic-Con and Star Trek conventions because everybody's in a costume and all they have to do is put on a cloak, and you think they've got a really good costume on, especially if they're drooling. Oh, that's a really good tail, and oh, that looks so real because you're drooling. Well, you're standing in front of me and you're really juicy looking, you're really yummy looking. So I'm going to drool. But
Right.
but I personally don't, I've never heard Mark talk about the raptors changing form, and it's really hard to shapeshift and change your atomic structure. There are species, I think, who can like project a holographic image, like in the TV show V, so that they will look human, even though they're about to bite your head off.
Right. Of interesting note, my friend and I were actually talking about maybe next year going to Tombstone and cosplaying Star Trek characters. Have some Klingons, some Romulans, a few Ferengi, and just hang out there at the dude ranches.
I've been to Tombstone. That's a fun place. And what's interesting is before the Dulce base in New Mexico got built, like in the early 40s, before we were actually involved with World War II, there was a lot of alien and Nazi stuff going on in the American Southwest. And one of the things my father-in-law had to do as a teenager was go and deal with that. And a fun fact is a lot of rich guys or whatever who probably weren't politicians yet, but like Barry Goldwater and like movie actors who maybe acted as cowboys in the movies, they were often doubling as agents for the government. So it's interesting, these weird stories that come up about, well, okay, this is how the public was told that particular cowboy actor died, but it's not really. But yeah, it's
Interesting.
Weird stories I get from my husband. And what about David Icke? I know you love him. David, and obviously I've never heard David Icke speak. I've heard him on some videos, and I've heard what he thinks about reptilians. So I just say my opinion is different than his on many of those kind of issues. I'm not going to stand and debate with him. There are many types of reptilians, and I'm always correcting people on that. There's several species of reptilians, so I hate for people to lump them all into one group. Some are our friends, some are not. I just say that the few things I've heard David Icke say about reptilians, I disagree with. But not everybody. It's fine. We can all agree to disagree.
Right. You've also it's also been stated that the Greys are actually two different species as well. It's just our understanding of the Greys are most of the time are either the robot or the creators or
Right.
the guys from Zeta Reticuli.
Right.
I'm saying that wrong. I do apologize.
No, it's okay. I'll answer your question in just a minute, Mike, because I don't have a good answer. But in I think the report I do or the talk I do about different alien species, Mark had said there's at least 6 types of Greys. Some work with the more negative aliens, and some work with us. Some are our friends, some are not. Some are very involved with kidnapping humans for the bad aliens, or that don't want to kidnap us for good reasons, type of thing. It's been so long since I heard one of David Icke's talks. I don't remember exactly specifically what I disagreed with him on. I'd have to go listen to that again. I just remember that when I did hear some of his talks, what he, we just agree on something. I just can't remember what it was, and I apologize.
No problem.
Oh, Howard Hughes. Cool. Oh.
Yes.
Howard Hughes was in the know.
I figured that much, basically to me, it kind of pulls between the fact of, was it OCD that drove him, or was it the pretty much he knew too much and went mad because of it?
Yes, definitely. And yes, he did that's my opinion, that he probably went mad because he knew too much. And it's like, I remember, bless her heart, my mother-in-law had dementia before she died. And I think I know more about what her husband and my husband were involved with. She knew some stuff, and I think she even saw some stuff that she probably wished she'd hadn't, as far as aliens and whatever.
Right.
She knew enough to know that, her husband was involved in some weird crap. And, she's seen him come out of his hangar in a flying saucer. So, she knew he was more than just a procurement officer for the Air Force.
Right.
But I don't think that helped her dementia down the line, because she knew so many secrets. And as the military wife, you have to pretend you don't know anything.
Right.
So number one, I know some stuff that I probably shouldn't know, but who knows? I think Mark really only tells me stuff I'm allowed to share, but it's like, I still know more than a lot of people. And I know that was really hard for his mom, for example. You have to keep the secret, and you have to keep a cover story.
Right.
So, his dad was a procurement officer for the Air Force. Like, sure he was.
He dealt with imports and exports.
He did. So, yes, David Icke does fill massive venues. I've kind of followed him, and I know people who have helped, be volunteers at his various events. So, I would like to have massive audiences, but someday maybe that'd be good. I'm sure, and there's a lot of presidents. Well, no, I don't know how many presidents saw aliens. Am I restricted by the Official Secrets Act? No, because I'm married to an inmate. What secrets do I really know? It's
Right.
like I am not bound by that, and I'm not in the military, and I was never in the military. So, and he's only sharing with me stuff he's allowed to really share. He doesn't share anything with me that was maybe under U.S. military orders. He'll usually only share with me like, okay, well, this is what my dad did and he's dead, so I can tell you, or this is what I got from a report from a person who worked with my dad, so I can share it. He can't talk about his personal U.S. military involvement. And then he also worked for an international military intelligence agency that Admiral Nimitz and then Mark's dad ran. Those things he can share because technically, supposedly, I don't know if I believe this, but, he swears that after his dad died, that whole agency went underground. I mean, just died, basically. I go, well, I don't think any of that stuff ever dies, so somebody's got to be running it. But,
Right. Going back to Jimmy Carter seeing aliens, I remember an interview Jackie Gleason did where basically he approached Nixon back in 69, 70 and said, I know, let me see them. And Nixon's like, what do you mean? He says, Jack Lee says, "What? I want you to show me proof of aliens." And Richard Nixon says, give me a couple of weeks. And then in the middle of the night, he got a phone call from one of the detail saying, "Meet me here at this such location." And of course, Jackie Gleason shows up. Nixon's there. And Nixon shows him something, and to the day he died, he says, "What I saw made me believe in extraterrestrial life, both on the Earth as well as out in the universe." And everybody's asking, "Well, what was it?" He says, "I can't tell you. I
right.
made that promise to Richard Nixon." But
It's interesting because one of the Mark told me early on was like, every time a president gets inaugurated, shortly thereafter, they're taken into this other room, just theoretical room. I don't know where they get taken, but, they get taken aside and get told the truth. Now, they never have enough as much clearance as the military people in charge, but it's like the president is always read in. So at least he knows that, okay, the whole UFO thing and aliens, it's real. You're never going to have as high. It's like, so at least they know. And back in the 1961 conference I mentioned, President Kennedy was fully aware of the alien stuff. He and the British Prime Minister authorized the conference to be taking place. But then, he didn't go to the conference, but the vice president was there. And all these heads of states and political dignitaries and military dignitaries, they were there. Even if they'd never seen an alien before, they were there and they saw aliens and they were, entering treaty negotiations with them. So, and they also could never talk about it after they left. Publicly, especially, but but they know, and they just can't talk about it. And it's so funny because these little things that we think we're getting glimpses of currently. It's like, well, okay, the military's known about this stuff for years, They always have. And even in Mark's reports, because, back in the 70s, we already had lists of all these species and where specifically they live in space. The aliens don't really want us to know where they live because we're messy and we leave garbage in space, and they don't want us to come and horn in on their territory, because we shoot first. And it's like, they know that we they don't want us just running out there and, let me invade your planet type of thing. So they're not real, like they never, because they're so more evolved and older than we are. Back in 1961, they were telling Marx, like, it's like, well, they just didn't even think we were sentient beings. They were not convinced we were sentient beings in 1961. So,
Right.
There's been lists for years.
It's that old joke adage of the moral is shoot first, ask questions later.
Right.
They're coming out of the hospital pretty soon.
Yeah, it's like we are like that. Does it scare you guys? And will they stop Putin's? Does what scare me?
Probably the
whole alien thing.
The whole alien thing of of what we are as humans maybe scare us.
I go by the adage, I do not live in fear. I know what certain alien species are capable of. I know that we are constantly, there's constantly problems with aliens on this planet. There's problems between alien species in space. It's like, if you think space is a total peaceful place, you're wrong, because they're battling each other. Yeah, I wouldn't mind going to visit.
Planets.
Yeah. And again, if our alien allies, they could very well help us with the problem in Ukraine. It would just be very messy, and then you would have a very messy disclosure. Before COVID hit, they were, especially the raptors and some other species, they really wanted to ramp up and, let's have disclosure. It's time, we're ready. And then COVID hit, and COVID, I'm sure there's humans involved, but the reptoids were, it's like there was an alien presence when COVID, it's like they worked together. And these strains keep coming out because, the reptoids keep wanting, anyway, COVID probably will never go away. I don't know, but we don't need to go there. But what was I going to say? Is that the end of the show?
Yes, let's go ahead. Finish up right here. Where can we find you on this wonderful wide web?
Sorry, www.edhq.org. If you're interested in my book, it's on all the usual online places, but my website is dragonhillbooks.net. So, and my email is at either place, and then joanne@midlifemagic.biz. So you can find me. I'm there. I've got a Facebook group. Just type in my name and spell it right, and you'll find me.
Well, we could always spell it right. We have an aunt by the name of Joanne, and the last name is Richardson.
Ah, close. So, good. Thank you so much for all your participation, Mike.
No problem. And thank you, Mike. Love for you to come back and hang with us again. Like I said, next week we're going to be doing on Howard Hughes, Madman or OCD victim.
Wow. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. This has been so much fun.
Thank you. Usually we go an hour. We went about an hour and a half. That's a good thing.
You can just get me going and I won't stop. So.
Yes.
Kim, where can we find us?
We can be found anywhere podcasts are shared: Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google, Audible. Just type in Skeptic Psychic. We're right there. And if you do listen to us, make sure you rate us and review us. And what kind of review do we like?
We'd love to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stars. Everybody say 5 stars. Can we say it in the group? 5 stars.
5 stars.
Yes, we do prefer 5 stars, but we'll take whatever you give us. And if you do rate us, again, leave a review. We do read reviews on air. If you do have any
criticisms, always requested. If you say that we suck, tell us why we suck, but don't be mean.
Right.
Yes.
There's no room for meanness.
Yes. If you have any questions for us, or you want to give us a recommendation of what we could talk about or anything, you can reach us at info@skepticpsychic.com,
Cool.
as well as our website, skepticpsychic.com. And Mike, actually, the show is ending, but you're more than welcome to join our Facebook group, Skeptic Psychic, and we do carry on conversations there, as well as communicate with some great people who are interested in all things paranormal, whether it be aliens, ghosts, ESP,
Cool.
you name it.
We also
Cool.
have a presence on Instagram as well as Twitter.
Oh, cool.
Both of them you can actually reach a Skeptic Psychic.
Cool. I'm
Yes.
learning about Instagram. So
Yes.
and Mike, feel free to email if you want, and I have a couple of Facebook groups. So
Yes, and we do stream every Sunday at 5 p.m. Central Time. We are found on Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube. If you like us on YouTube, make sure you subscribe and click the notification so you know when we have new videos.
oh, cool.
We're
Anything
also
else?
on Twitch.
Yes.
Skeptic
Anything,
Psychic, you can actually subscribe there too.
anything else I missed?
Well, that we love you. We care about you. And with the awesome praise, unpleasant nightmares.
Sweet dreams, everybody.
Thanks. You've been great.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yes. Good night.
Good night. Are you still there?